So New York City's congestion pricing plan kicked in today. I don't have a car, so it doesn't really affect me personally, but I love this topic because it wraps up all of my favorite topics into one thing. You get traffic, the environment, crime, public transportation, and they all get rolled together into one big dumb debate. It's like the Avengers of like public policy. First off, traffic. I mean, the idea here is that if you charge people enough money, they will be dissuaded from driving into Manhattan. I think they're charging like $7 to come in below 61st Street or something like that. And this is something that's been done in other parts of the world. I think in London, I know in Singapore it was very successful. And the idea is that if we do it here, it's going to have the same effect where people aren't going to drive as much and there won't be so much traffic. I think the problem here is that this ignores the difference between Americans and people in Singapore. I lived in Singapore for a little bit when I was in college. I studied abroad there. And Singapore, much like most other Asian countries, there is much more uniformity to people. And people are down to follow rules. You give them strict rules to follow, they might grumble a little bit, but they're going to get on board. Americans don't like getting on board. And New Yorkers in particular are a non-getting on board bunch. That is pretty much what defines them. And this is not just all New Yorkers. This is a specific group of people. You got to think the people that they're trying to target with these laws are people who are driving into Manhattan. So it's the busiest part of the busiest city in the country. And these people are getting in their car, driving in, and having to find parking every day. These people are, by definition, very motivated, to say the least. Very motivated, and they're not going to be easily dissuaded into leaving their car at home and taking the train. The fact that they're even going through this whole process should show you what type of person you're dealing with here. So these people, you're not going to get them to not drive as much. They're going to keep driving, but they're just going to be pissed off about it. And I mean, it's $7. So anybody who can afford to drive into Manhattan, they got that kind of money. That's not the problem. It's the principle of the thing. You could double that price. They're going to keep paying. That was kind of a big debate too, because this came up before, and the price was originally going to be $15. And then there was a big outcry, and then they canceled the whole thing for a little while. Then they brought it back now because Trump won. So now the governor wants to push this through before Trump takes office. So now it's going to be $7, and then I think later on the price is going to go up in a few years. I really think that the kind of people who drive into Manhattan, you would have to raise the price so much that it wouldn't even be politically feasible. It would be something like $60 to drive into the city before any of these people would actually be persuaded to leave their car at home and get on the train. That's how much these people hate the train. And that's kind of the other issue here, is that this whole thing is supposed to be to, motivate people to take New Jersey Transit basically into the city. People who drive into Manhattan hate taking the train. They hate taking the train so much that they'll sit in their car in the Holland Tunnel for an hour. And they'll pay so much more money in insurance and gas and tolls, parking, just to avoid getting on the train. That's how much they hate it. And I mean, you're seeing a lot of arguments now because, New York City, people like talking about the crime rate. One thing I've seen a lot is people are saying something like, what you should do first is solve crime on the subway. If you can get the subway safe, then more people will want to take the train and they won't be driving so much and you won't have to have these stupid laws. The problem with that is that, maybe there is some truth to it. The crime has been up a little bit in the city. The problem is that crime is up in the city, but it's not up as much as people say it's up because they're getting all of their news through social media. And when somebody gets all their news through social media as opposed to, real life and experiencing the New York City subway in person, is you can never actually tell these people that the subway is safe. You can tell them, but they're not going to believe you. That's the problem. That's kind of the world that we're in right now, is that you can tell somebody that crime is down, and they'll tell you, no, crime's actually up. They're just not reporting it. Which might be true, might not be true. But if that is your worldview, there is nothing anybody can ever do to convince you that the subway is safe. Like, there's going to be viral videos you're going to see of crazy shit happening on the subway. Of course. It's a big city. Crazy stuff happens. But you're not going to see a viral video of nothing happening, because that wouldn't go viral. And there's nothing you're ever going to be able to convince somebody who thinks that it's dangerous. There's nothing you'll be able to tell them. How can you prove a negative? You can't. All you can do is what they're basically doing now, which is putting a bunch of National Guard guys with machine guns in front of the subway train. Basically, they don't even put them on the train. They put them in the station. So now there's armed guards everywhere, and people still don't feel safe because the armed guards aren't even doing anything. They're just standing around making sure you don't hop the turnstile. The other issue here is that this whole thing is supposed to, the money that we get from congestion pricing is supposed to go to fixing the trains. And that is definitely going to be a letdown. The problem is, I think, like anything else in a big city in America, is that we can't really decide how much something should cost. Like, starting from scratch, nobody can really tell you how much it costs to run a big city subway system like this. All we know is that it sucks. And so it must be because we got to put some more money into it. It must be underfunded, because if it wasn't underfunded, it would be nice. And that's not true. The MTA's budget right now is $19 billion, which sounds to me like a lot of money. I mean, maybe it's not enough, but it sounds like enough. I'm pretty sure it's enough. But we're always going to feel like we need to throw more money into the system because the system itself is so old and decrepit. That is the root of the issue of the New York City subway from a technical standpoint, is that you got to think this subway system has been around for over 100 years. And it's basically the same lines that's been in use the entire time. We didn't start with one system and then build a new system. We started with the old system and then slowly iterated over 100 years. So there are still components to the New York City subway system that existed in the early 1900s, pre-World War II. And the problem is that because we all ride the train so much and the subway system is so vital to New York City infrastructure, is they can't just replace the whole thing. That's the problem. The subway system runs 24 hours a day because the city runs 24 hours a day. So there's no time in that 24-hour span to actually fix anything. Sometimes they do it overnight, and they say between 2 and 6 in the morning, oh, we're going to shut down the subway line. We're going to send a bunch of guys in there to fix something. But they can do that here and there, but they can't actually fix the whole thing. You go to China, they have very sophisticated subways, and they have, electric and, high-speed trains that are crisscrossing the country. That's because all that stuff is new. They didn't have that before 100 years ago. So they're able to build a nice thing. That's the reason why high-speed internet is better in some parts of sub-Saharan Africa than it is in America. It's because we started with dial-up, and then we built something on top of that and something on top of that until eventually we got to our current system, whereas they got to start with high-speed internet. We're not going to build a nice subway system because we can't. All we can do is take our old subway and fix it up piece by piece. To put this in New York terms, you got to think about the New York Jets paying Aaron Rodgers $100 million. The New York City subway system is Aaron Rodgers. It was nice when it was young, but now it's old. And you can't fix old. All you can do is patch it up. So, the subway system is so old that we're not going to get a new system. All we're going to do is slowly fix up the one we already have. And the one we have is constantly falling apart. I feel like I should start a new political party, which is like the defeatist party. There's a voice you never get to hear in Washington, is the group of people who are telling you, no, it's the problems we're having are too insurmountable. And, well, we're basically just stuck.